Hello, this is another in the series of oral histories that we're doing for the Archives of Iowa Broadcasting. I'm Cliff Brockman. Joining me today is Bob Ketchum from KLGA Radio in Algona. Today, by the way, is October 21st, 2024. Hello, Bob. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Good to see you again, Cliff. We actually worked together for a month or two. Well, not very long.
I think
In
I
what?
was actually here.
1977?
Yeah, I didn't leave there till 81. So we're talking about KAYL. But
Yeah, we
anyway,
worked there a few years together.
We'll talk about that a little more. Now you started, Bob. Well, Bob, first of all, where did you grow up? Where are you from?
Owine, Iowa.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
I
that.
graduated from high school in Owine.
Yeah.
And,
Well, then your first job was in Harlan, but you weren't in broadcasting at that point, were you?
well, broadcasting was just a mistake. I was supposed to be in newspaper business. My father was composing room foreman at the Owine Daily Register. Can believe they had a daily paper. When I was in high school, I worked there. An older brother who had worked there. I went on to short course community journalism at Iowa State, got a job at the Harlan newspapers, was there for 2 years. I got drafted. When I got out of the Army, I looked for a newspaper job. But back then, the Sioux City Journal and Channel 4 TV and Sioux City were owned by the same company. After that, they changed the rules, couldn't do that. But at that time, they did. It'd be 1971. And so the publisher of the Sioux City Journal, I was the general manager of the TV station. I'd applied for a job at the Journal. He asked if I'd be interested in the sports director job at the TV station. So accidentally got into television.
I wondered how you got into television. Yeah. So you were the sports director there at KTIV?
Yes,
for
about 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. And then you decided to switch.
I was really not very good at that job.
Oh, okay. So then you decided to switch to sales, and you went out to KAYL in Storm Lake. Is that right?
Yes. Well, after the TV station, I decided I should get a degree. I still hadn't been to college, so I went back for 3 years to college, got a degree at Briar Cliff, then looked for another newspaper job, and I couldn't find one, so I ended up in sales in Storm Lake. It wasn't what I was looking for.
How did it come about that you were in Storm Lake? Just the only thing you could find?
Well, when I was at the TV station, I had run into, I've been to the state tournament covering stuff for sports, and run into Chuck Nye, who did sports, of course, for KAYL and Storm Lake. And having not found anything in newspaper business, I called Chuck Nye and said, Chuck, do you know of any radio gigs? He was connected a lot, doing the state basketball tournament every year back then on a network. And I thought Chuck was kind of connected. And he said, well, I don't know about anything except we need a salesperson here. Well, it's the last job I wanted. I didn't want to be in sales there, but I ended up as the best chance. I just took it. It's all I had. It's all I had.
Oh, okay. I wondered about that. Well, you like sales, I think, as I recall.
One of the things I liked about it was, and I've liked throughout my career in radio, really, was the independence of it. Once you leave the door, you're on your own. Didn't have somebody looking over my shoulder. And that station was run without a lot of micromanagement. And so I had the opportunity to do what I wanted to do. Success was based on my own efforts and results. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us any humorous stories from your time at KAYL?
Wow, I don't know. We
had some characters.
We had a lot of fun. Cliff, maybe you remember we had great Christmas parties.
Oh yeah,
and we did. And in about 1992, some jump ahead here. I got appointed to be in charge of the Christmas party. And so by then the station was owned by the Hedberg Group and run more by father-son combination of Paul Mark Hedberg. And Mark came to our Christmas party, and I had arranged for a lot of these complicated games and things. So we had great parties. We had games and prizes and teams together, and based on basic TV game shows. I had a Final Jeopardy thing at the end, and a question or an answer. You had to give the right question. What recorded the Jeopardy music and had all on there. Well, anyway, Mark Hedberg and his wife came to that party. And then in March of the next year, 2.5 months later, Mark came into my office and he rarely visited Storm Lake, but there he was, and said, I'm going to buy a radio station in Algona or Fort Dodge. Not sure which yet, working on both deals. If I get one bought, would you be the manager? He said, he didn't know me from anything except that Christmas party. He said, I could see at that Christmas party you were so well organized. So how many guys in radio got a manager's job based on a Christmas party? But that's what happened. That's what happened to me.
Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. So we had some good times working at the radio station at Storm Lake.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember we had some characters. Our morning guy was Andy Lynn Stotts. Went by Andy.
and a tremendous talent. It's one of the themes I've had in 40 years in radio in small towns was that there was not enough respect for the talent that was in those communities. And Andy's a great example. What a great talent he was. And I ended up working later on for people who had little respect for they kind of thought that if you were in a small town, it's because you didn't have the ability or talent to move up to a bigger market. And it's just not true. In some cases, maybe, but Andy's a good example. Andy was a great talent. And later on, Bob Jennings came in there in a news, somebody in a news gig, and then later on worked with me in Algona, another incredible talent, equal to anybody. Down the road, I worked in Algona with Al Luke. You've had him on this series. I don't know if you know, but he's a tremendous interviewer. I've never known anybody who can interview people the way Al Luke does. He interviews, the princess at the county fair. It could be an 11-year-old girl, could be an 11-year-old boy who showed a hog at the fair. It could be a U.S. senator. I've seen him interview all those from one to the other, and he is a tremendous talent. I once asked him, I said, Al, can you teach other people to do it? Well, apparently he can't, but he never taught me how to. But I modeled a lot of stuff I did after Al. And it just comes instinctively to him. He talks to people, you listen to him, and after a 15-minute interview, you realize you never heard Al there at all. You didn't even know he was there. It was just all about the other person because Al has no ego. And it was all about the other person. So many great talents that I ran into in small market radio. Andy, you bring up Andy's one. We had one in Storm Lake.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then you did make the switch to KLGA right after he offered you that
I
job.
went there in 93 after 16 years in Storm Lake. Thought maybe it was a crazy thing to do. Mark Hedberg offered me the opportunity, and at the beginning it was a mess. That station, the first day was the start of the 93 floods, and the roof leaked, and it leaked in a dozen or more places, and it leaked a lot. And we had mice throughout the building. We didn't have hot water. Didn't have hot water there for many years. Didn't have a hot water heater. It was quite the place. It was a mess. We started low, but Jennings came with a great news director, Scott France, who's still in radio as far as I know, working in Sioux Center today. Scott was there as a sports director with a tremendous talent. Some other good people that we actually had a lot of success there.
Yeah. Well, you must have liked it in Algona. You sure stayed a long time there. What about the community?
I mentioned already, one of the things I like about radio and about what I have found in radio was the independence. And Algona is a great example. Went over there on a weekday and met Mark Hedberg for lunch. Mark owned the place, and Mark had offered me the job and the opportunity. And we went over to tell the station staff about the sale. They were in the dark, and we announced the station. The station's been sold. Bob's the new GM. And then Mark said to me, I'm in Mason City, an hour drive away. I'll be over here every Friday to visit with you, and I'll just come in on Friday if you need any help. and I'll be here every Friday. Well, he owned the station for another 6 years, and I think he came over twice. So he never came over. I was on my own. I sent paperwork. I talked to him on the phone once in a while, but it was up to me. And I just enjoyed that independence. I'm gonna be judged on the results of my staff and what we do. And we had a lot of success. And then Mark sold it after a 6-year thing, and then we started in something that happened in radio at that time was corporate. We went away from being locally owned, and from my start with Paul Benson, who really is the baseline for me in radio, local. Paul was just a local guy. I don't think he even knew. And another person you've interviewed on this program and these interviews, Paul probably didn't even think about that he was this concentration on local. It's just the way he grew up, and it's the baseline for my career is local small market radio. First with Paul Benson, then Paul Hedberg when he bought Storm Lake Station, and then in my own efforts and with Mark in Algona. Then we started in 1999. They sold to Wait Media, and a new character entered my life, which is George Pelletier. And I had a new mentor, and I learned quite a bit from George too. But George, fortunately, had spent a lot of time in Emmitsburg, Iowa. He knew what small town life was like, and also supported people like me doing small market radio. We had that group ended up being a lot of stations, small market stations in that Wait group for a while. And, but it did change things. We went into what I consider really the downfall of small market radio in America. We started into corporate radio.
Oh, okay. How many stations were in that corporation?
Well, I think about 20. They had them in South Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska is where they were. And Norm Waite Jr. had made $1 billion in Gateway Computers, and then sold out before Gateway crashed. He'd sold out his interest and I remember George Pelletier in my office one time with Norm Waite. I met him one time. I only met him one time, and, even though he owned the station. And George said to me, "You ever met a billionaire before?" I said, "No, I don't think so." And but Wait Radio, that group was dedicated to small market. They owned a bunch of small market stations, and they ended up at times they had Storm Lake, Spirit Lake, Sioux Center, Webster City, a couple Fort Dodge stations, and then they were in small markets, and they're all small in South Dakota and Nebraska, and so that was a learning experience. It was a change for me. 99, and then somewhere along the line, Wait merged with NRG Media, which is was out of Cedar Rapids, and run by Mary Quass. I would assume you're familiar with Mary Quass.
Heard her name,
she's a Hall of Fame broadcaster, a legend in Iowa broadcasting. I did not. I got to be careful too. I did not like working for NRG Media, and that's kind. I hated it. I didn't hate Mary Quass. I have a lot of respect for Mary Quass. I think Mary Quass's problem was that she wasn't involved in it herself enough. Others ran it, and the people who worked for her, I had a hard time with. I had a few bad years there, but I will say that it was just a deal where the people running the place had the only experience in larger communities, and they didn't understand small town radio. It's different. They didn't understand it, and but then they ended up selling to Riverfront Broadcasting out of South Dakota, and I go through another ownership change. This happened to me a lot in my career. Riverfront with Doyle and Carolyn Becker. Now, when we were in Storm Lake, Carolyn Becker was a part-time employee because she went to Buena Vista. Now, it might have been after you left.
I think it was.
But Carolyn was from Yankton, South Dakota. And we were told, and this is about 2012, 13 maybe, we were told the station had been sold again, walked into a hotel room, conference room in Ames or something, I think it was, to meet the new owners. I walk into the room and there's Carolyn Becker, the part-timer from Buena Vista I knew from Storm Lake, and her husband are the new owners. And that was my favorite. I mean, I worked for them for about 4 or 5 years. And that was my favorite experience in radio. They were tremendous, great people, understood small market radio, supported the managers, and loved working for them. Loved working for them. I was going to retire at 65, didn't retire until I was 68 because I just liked working for them so much. They stayed for 3 more years.
Oh.
So.
Yeah. So then you retired in 68.
I retired in 17 at 68. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, at 68. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I was 68 at the time. Yeah.
So what have you been doing since?
Well, the first 2 years after I retired, I worked as a substitute school teacher. If you have a college degree in Iowa, if you have a college degree, you can take a short course offered by Department of Education through the AEAs and be certified as a substitute. And I did that, and I worked as a substitute at the high school, and I just to stay active, something to do. And my wife was teaching before that. She's an elementary teacher. And I knew through her experience, I didn't want anything to do with elementary, too hard. I couldn't handle those kids. So I did high school, and I did that for 2 years. I really enjoyed it. And then COVID hit, and I decided not to go back into the building, but hadn't been for COVID, I would have stayed with it. I miss it. I really enjoyed that. Substitute teaching was fun. I enjoyed the kids. Just good experience.
Yeah. Good.
At Algona High School.
I don't know if you remember, my wife was a school teacher. She taught for 40 years.
Yes, I kind of thought so. We had that in common. When I was in Storm Lake, Jan taught preschool at a church program, and then when we came to Algona, she got recertified to teach, took a class or two she needed to do, and then got hired first as an aide, and then taught in the Twin Rivers School District, which is out of Bode, and she taught there while we were in Algona until she retired.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a couple of maybe kind of deep questions here, make you think a little deeper. What do you, first, what do you think has changed about broadcasting? You mentioned the corporations, but I know Algona is locally owned again now, aren't they?
It is locally owned again, all for the better. I went through that time going from in the late 90s, getting into a bigger company, owning a bunch of stations. And of course, at that time, Clear Channel's in buying up stations, or there shortly thereafter, and Cumulus or whatever. My daughter worked for Cumulus for a while. And I don't think they didn't understand then, and don't to this day, what makes small market radio work. It's all about being local and they trim payroll by getting rid of people who make it work locally, and they it's having local news. It's not available anywhere else, especially since people don't read newspapers like they used to. It's got to come from the local radio station, and people are hungry for that information. They want to hear what the city council's doing, what school doing, what accidents they had, even obituaries. They want to know who died. Oh, yeah. People, and when you tell people, like I had with NRG and a boss that been in Chicago, worked in Milwaukee and Chicago, and you tell them we put obituaries on the air about it, they just can't believe that. It's like, why would you do that? Well, people care. It's what they want to hear.
I remember reading obituaries when I was doing the news at KAYL, and if you mispronounced the name or didn't get it right, there was phone calls. That was the most listened to part of the newscast.
And Bob Jennings tells a story of doing obituaries when I was there. I remember it in Storm Lake at KAYL when there weren't any, and just he splurted. He out of his mouth pops, "Well, I hope we have some tomorrow."
Oops.
Yeah, that was an oops. He heard about that, and he tells the story on himself once in a while.
That's a pretty good one.
Can't explain why he said that.
Well, I remember
Yeah.
too, one thing about that is people would have the same spellings on their names, and they'd even be related, but they would pronounce their last names differently. So I would get in trouble over that if I,
Oh,
mispronounced the name.
oh,
If
and if
you,
you, yeah, and now that's one of the things I found out the first, especially in Algona, when I first got to Algona. Yeah, they'd call you up and say, everybody knows how to pronounce that name. How could you get it wrong? You
yeah,
know,
what's wrong
but,
with you?
but then how would you like to have been? Well, one of the people the great people I worked with over the years was Craig Aukus, who I really invited into the family at KAYL. Later became the manager at the Sioux Center station. And how would you like to go up there and to be in Dutch country? I broadcast a few games up there over the years, and oh my gosh, those names are hard. I think I still hold a world record outside of Holland. I broadcast a Storm Lake St. Mary's Unity Christian game from Orange City one time, and there were 6 starters on the floor because it's 6-on-6 girls basketball. That's why the record's 6, not 5, of 6 starters with the last name ending in A. All 6 at Unity, of course.
And did you get their
You
names
know,
pronounced right?
oh, I probably messed them up. So I probably messed them up, but.
Yeah.
But doing play-by-play is part of what I did. From play-by sport, interest in sports, did play-by-play in Storm Lake. A lot of it now going, and Mark Hedberg said from the beginning, you're going to go out and broadcast Algona football, basketball, and people are going to know you from that, and you're going to know them, and that's good for us. And Paul understood, Mark, his son, understood that that you go see a client and they might say, oh, my son's on that football team, you broadcast that game, and they know you from it. It's part of. I'll tell you, one of the great lessons I learned was from Paul Hedberg when he first bought the Storm Lake market. Paul Benson wanted to retire, and of course Chuck and I had passed away, and we were scared of Paul. I was afraid. I went looking for jobs. I found out the station was sold. I'm done with radio. They won't want me to be around. I was scared of Paul Hedberg. He was a larger than life figure and a Hall of Famer. Well, Paul came into the first meeting and he saw a little 8x11 printout sheet that we delivered to restaurants. You remember those days?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I'd
We put
forgotten
out the
what
little
those
sheet
was.
of
Yeah,
news headlines and then
yeah,
distribute it to all the cafes
yeah,
and
yeah.
put it on the tables. And
Right.
Paul saw that and he said, "Do you make money on that?" And we all looked at each other and go, "Well, no, we just print it out and put it out for headline. We don't make money on it." And he said, "Then why do you do it?" Lesson number 1. Then lesson number 2, he said, the governor, I don't even know who the governor was back then. I don't remember. So the governor's going to be here and speak at Buena Vista College about 2 weeks from now. He's got a speech scheduled. It's going to be a BV. Somebody will pay you to broadcast that speech. Go get it. Go get the money. And in other words, if you know the community really well, be local, be involved. Who supports that governor. If he's a Republican governor, he probably was. Who are the big Republicans in this county in business? Who will pay you? Who do you have to go see, and where's the money going to come from? If you know, as Paul would say, where every body is buried. And being local and be involved and know people. So I learned, I had that basis of Paul Benson of local, and then in comes Paul Hedberg, who has these lessons about, broadcast what people will pay you for.
Yeah.
You broadcast a football game because people will pay you to do it.
Sure.
And, it's how we made money.
It was community service as well, though, as well as just
It
making
is.
money. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So's the news.
Yeah.
They don't get it anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's when we were in Algona, we started a thing in Algona a long time ago called Pack the Trailer. A client came to us, run a restaurant, and said, "I want to do this campaign to raise money and food for the Kossuth County Food Pantry." And It's okay. We got together with them, and on the Friday before Thanksgiving every year, they have something called Pack the Trailer. They got a big trailer, put it in the parking lot. Bring your food, but bring money, because money's better than food when it comes to food pantry. They can buy stuff cheaper than you can. So we did a Pack the Trailer one-day fundraiser in Algona, and the first time we did it, we raised about $58,000 in cash.
Wow.
And I would tell this story to people in big markets who would listen. Most of them won't listen. My bosses that were from big markets wouldn't listen. But you realize in a town of 5,800, if you raise $58,000 in cash, that's $10 for every man, woman, and child in this town in one day. In one day for a good cause. Now, we don't want to take too much credit. It's a generous community. A lot of people help, partners, etc. But they couldn't do it without the radio station. They tell you that we were a big part of that. And then look at if you were in a community, let's say you're in a community of 500,000, or you're bigger, you're running a radio station, 500,000 town. They have the same results per capita. You would have to raise $5 million in one day. Has any radio station ever done that? The answer is no. But they can't raise $10 per person for every person in that town in one day, even for the best cause. But small market radio can. Incredible power, incredible involvement. But you can do it if you know who's willing to give you money. We contests going between groups and peoples to see who could raise the most, to bring the most money out to Pack the Trailer, and do it every year. And great success. And that led to, we did get the Crystal Award nomination after that. It's one of the reasons we got, which Crystal Award is given by the broadcasters, national broadcasters, for community service. And they give one a year. They have 10. There are 10 nominated each year for the final award, and taken to Vegas. We got to go to Vegas, and we didn't win the award. We weren't the single. Or maybe there were 10. Oh, there's 50 nominated and 10 chosen. That's what it was. We were 50 nominated. We didn't get chosen. But we were nominated for Crystal Award. That was a feather in our cap.
Yeah, sure. Well, do you think it's going back towards local ownership again? Because I know, as we said, KLGA is locally owned again.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Is that unusual?
One of the people I know well, I've known for over the years, Bob Fisher, in Mason City Radio, who's a tremendous local news guy, tremendous local sports guy, loads of talent, and exactly what this industry needs. And yet the corporate radio that owned Mason City in the last year laid him off. I heard Bob doing a Clear Lake football game a couple nights ago. So I know Bob's still doing Clear Lake football. I don't really know what he's doing. But I don't know, Cliff. It doesn't make any sense to me. They took stations that may have had, $1 million in revenue, and they took them down to half of that and think they're doing good. It just makes no sense. Mm-hmm. But they get less revenue. They just have less expenses, and there's just not much local programming. I don't know. In right now in Algona, someone again that I'm real proud of, because she worked for me for a long time, Bernie Merrill, and her husband have purchased that station, and they're doing well. So I'm real happy about that. By the way, maybe it'll turn.
Yeah, Bob Fisher. Bob Fisher did land at another radio station there in Mason City. I do know Bob, so I can't remember what the call letters are. But he came out of it okay. Yeah. But
so he's another. Yeah. So well, he's another guy. Local, great talent in a smaller market. There's just been. I've been fortunate to work with a bunch of them and seen that it's out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't want to really, Clear Channel has sold off a lot of their stations. It just seems to me like maybe they're headed back locally, but I don't know.
The truth is I'm kind of out of the loop now, so I'm not seeing what's happening, but that's good to know. That's good to know. There are people at the local level. I wrote a letter to Clear Channel once and asked them if they'd sell me the Charles City station, because they'd taken it to, they'd stripped it and got it down to nothing, and run a couple people from Mason City were running over there to run it on they had nothing local going on at all. I thought, it's just, but I never got a reply on that one. So maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Yeah,
Coming
I'd,
back.
I'd like to think
Coming
so, but
back.
you're probably
Yeah.
right. It isn't. Yeah, it's more of a money machine. What can they make out of it? Well, let
Yeah.
me ask you one. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I got it.
Let me ask you one last question here. We don't want to be too morbid, but how would you like people to remember you?
Oh.
Through your career or, through your family, through your community?
Well, wow. Uh, uh, I hope that, and for the last quite a few years, um, 24 years, I was a manager. And I would hope that the employees that worked for me would look back and say I was fair and I cared about them and I did what I could for them. Um, and it was generous when I could be, and and I really wanted the radio station to serve the community. What was best for the community uh, was important to me. Um, I don't know what else I could say.
Well, those are great thoughts. Great thoughts. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, I think our time is run out here. So I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Cliff. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about radio and reconnecting with you. That we worked together a long, long time ago, and our career paths haven't crossed in the last many years, but we know some of the same people. But anyway, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, same here. I really enjoyed it, kind of reminiscing about some of those things. Well, again, our guest today, Bob Ketchum, retired general manager of KLGA Radio in Algona. And I'm Cliff Brockman, along with producer Paul Yeager. Thanks for joining us.